when you guys got started, I guess we could refresh people's memory really briefly about how long ago CAP was founded and why. Let's do that real quick.
2003, um, my daughter Maddie, she was diagnosed with alopecia, and at the time it was just areata, and really fast it just progressed to universalis. So when she lost all the hair on her body, it was more of a challenge to make sure that A, she felt good about herself, because I have four daughters and I want all four of them to always feel perfect as they are. And if they can change something, then okay, go ahead and change it. But I also wanted them to know that if you can change something about yourself, then you just have to own it. And I wanted to make sure that we were taking care of Maddie, but we also wanted to take care of ourselves. So we needed to find other families because we needed that support. So in 2004, we started doing support groups, and it just progressed to the point where the best way for us to help other people was to start a nonprofit. So we started the nonprofit August in 2004, and here I am now talking to you.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think hitting that 20-year milestone is huge, right? I mean, last year was kind of like,
Yeah,
wow, this is 20 years. This is amazing. And it really is. I mean, the way that you progressed from like having a few families within your first support group to now having support groups all over the country and beyond just the United
yeah.
States is pretty incredible. So, how do you think that growth happened? I mean, why do you think it was so rapid?
Well, at the very beginning, I probably was not the most savvy guy in the world. My philosophy, and I don't think I would have changed anything. I mean, if it would have happened today, I think I would have done the same thing. I just wanted to shove it down everyone's throat. I wanted
Hmm.
everybody to know what alopecia was. I wanted to make sure that before anybody had an idea of what they thought it might have been, that was just totally dispelled. And I was just going to shove it down their throat that this is alopecia. It's a piece of cake. Alopecia is easy. It's how she feels about herself. And that really, that deals with all of you. You guys get to dictate how she feels about herself because she's not feeling too good. We're not feeling too good. So I just, every opportunity I had to make a commercial, anybody asked me about her hair loss, it was like, hey, awesome. Thanks for asking. Here's my 5-minute commercial. Either the person was trying to get away from me so I could stop talking, or they
Hmm.
were interested and they wanted to listen to me. Um, and I just wanted to make sure that everybody knew what it was. That
Hmm.
was the most important thing. And I think because I don't want to say rude, I don't, at least I hope I was never rude to anyone. But with that, that impulse that I had in me, just to make sure that I was just going to spread the word about what it is. I just think it showed me in a light of being passionate, and then people were interested, and then I was invited to speak at local organizations, and then the people in this area really found out what alopecia was, and it wasn't as big of a deal as they thought it was because as you know, everyone thinks it's cancer. So once
Hmm.
it's not cancer, it's like, well, geez, thank goodness it's not cancer. It's only hair.
Hmm.
That's not a big deal. Then you have to re-educate them that, yeah, you're right. It's not cancer. Thank goodness for that. It's only hair. But because of it only being hair, put yourself in a child's shoes of not having hair. How would you feel? And then
Right.
you realize it's a bigger deal than you thought. And that's always been the difficult process for us on how to navigate having people support us because they want to support us because the mission is good, and feel just sorry enough to know that everything's fine because it's only alopecia. But you know what? There's a lot of kids out there that might need help. So maybe we should help this organization.
Hmm.
And then, of course, there's a whole bunch of people who are like, "Oh, geez, we're not helping you because it's only hair. It's
Hmm.
perfect. They're not sick." So it's always been very difficult to gauge that
Right.
direction.
Right. And it is that fine balance, right? I mean, you It's really important, like what you were doing, you were educating the community around you because that's where you guys live, and that's the most
Right.
important thing. So that when you go to the library, when you go to the coffee stand, when you go to McDonald's, whatever, wherever it was, school, right? School's the big
Yeah.
one. That they would know. I mean, that's always been both of our messages is I want people to think alopecia first before cancer,
Right.
right? Or at least have it on the same level. You just have,
Right.
you've got it on the same level. And so I think that the importance of that is huge. And I do think that there's leaps and bounds being made with education in probably the last, I don't know, even 5 years. It's been
Oh,
10 years, 10 years. I mean, it's been
there's no
better.
doubt
More
about it.
people know. More people know. You don't have, if you say alopecia, they go, oh yeah, I
Yeah.
know somebody, and usually people did know somebody, they just didn't have a name for it, right? Oh
Right.
yeah, there was a
Right.
kid in school that had that, or my uncle, or whatever. So,
Or they were thinking that alopecia was some type of cancer or, something
hmm
else that was bad.
right.
Yeah, so you're right. I mean, and a lot of that education has been done by advocates like us, but also negatively in the media when it comes to other things like, like
hmm
Will Smith slapping someone
hmm
and the other negative things that are happening or just the public personalities that you see that have alopecia that have not shied away from it and has they just basically embraced it. And
hmm
um, I think that helps also because back in the old days, um, people they just wanted to cover up, so they wore a wig. I mean, I've spoken to so many people that were in the public eye that nobody ever knew about their alopecia because they just were never going to show it, nor would they ever talk about it because
Right.
if they would talk about it, that could just doom their career.
hmm
So I think there's been a renaissance, definitely within the last 15 to 10 years, probably. And then
hmm
10 years on, it's been a lot easier.
Yeah.
There's so many less fires and so many less people on the cliff not knowing what to do because
Right.
there's more organizations out there. There's more nonprofits out there. There are more people like you that are individually helping families. So there's a lot more resources out there to be found. Sometimes I think
Mhm.
too many, but I think when you have too many, you'll find the one that fits best with you.
Right, right. Definitely information overload can be too much, especially in the beginning. I know you know that. It's like
Yeah.
all the information, you're like, well, what about this? What about that? What about this cure? What about that treatment? What about this? And you're going everywhere with it. But
Yeah. But
so
22 years ago, it was like the most crazy type of information. Like, yeah, I just remember, and I'll always remember this. Betsy and I, and for those who don't know, Betsy's my wife and co-founder of CAP. We were discussing like, oh my gosh, there's a spa in Moscow in Russia, and it's saying that it will grow back hair. We can't afford the three of us going, so one of us will have to go with Maddie. And we're
Mhm.
like, we're crunching numbers and we're trying to figure out schedules. And it really came down to we were that close to spending like $8,000 to go to Moscow because
Mhm.
of that need to be able to do something because there was just nothing we could do.
Right.
And I don't know I can't remember how we didn't do it. Somebody must have said something or we just decided that this is silly. I mean, and then
Mhm.
we just didn't go. And then our whole philosophy just changed after that. And
Right.
we just got smarter as we went. That's the one good thing about this. And I think
Yeah.
maybe any other diagnosis that you get, you might start out um, in a total collapse where it's a tragedy, but then you get smarter and
Mhm.
you just keep getting smarter, keep making decisions that might not work, but just keep on making those decisions until you find something that does. And I think that's
Right.
inevitably what happened.
Right. And I do think that regardless of if it was 20 years ago, like with you guys, or if it was, yesterday, that feeling of, oh my gosh, we have to do everything. What can we do is
Right.
really so powerful. It just takes over. And then, I mean, time and time again, I'm hearing the same questions. Well, what do we do? What about that? What about this? And it's just this whole as a parent, I mean, I'm a parent myself. And I know that when something happens to our kids, we want them to know that we've done everything that we can to make this a successful thing. And that,
Right.
and success looks like whatever, right? I mean, this can
Yeah.
be, it can show up as you going, okay, we're gonna walk through the mall, you and me, Maddie, and we're gonna just
Yeah.
walk for 10 feet, 20 feet, 30 feet, right? And start to build that confidence in that way. And many people have heard that story, but feel free to like be more accurate than I have been with it.
Yeah. I mean, first you realize that you can't just put a Band-Aid on it and kiss it and make it better.
Mm-hmm.
Um, if you put a Band-Aid on it, then what that does, it covers it up, which creates its own problems, which is what we found ourselves in. But in reference to the mall, we just decided that we wanted her to feel comfortable. She was afraid of people that she knew seeing her head, but she could care less about strangers, because when you're 5, I guess that's the way that you're thinking. Strangers can see me. They don't know me,
Mm-hmm.
so they're not going to make fun of me because they don't know me. Um, so we just went to the mall. She would take her hat off for 20 seconds, and then I would be on one side of the mall. She would be on the other side, and she would stand there and let people walk past her and see her. And then after 20 seconds, we would meet, and I would ask her questions about how she felt. Then we would go to another section. And then we just did that off and on for a few days. And eventually she said, you know what? It doesn't seem like anybody really cares. They stare at me and everything. But um, without going into the long story, I think I'm ready to go to school without the hat. And
Mm-hmm.
I wish it was that easy all the time,
Right.
but it really was that easy. And all I had to do was talk to the class.
Right.
And then from there, it was like, okay, this is like the first smart thing I did that worked. And then you just keep on piecing things together. You keep on doing
Mm-hmm.
decisions that are making sense. Um, Prior to that, a lot of the decisions we made just weren't smart ones because we just didn't know.
Yeah.
Um, and then it just comes down to loving your kids. I mean, because when you really think about it, when you really think about it, I can't recall ever having a conversation or even seeing an interview with anybody that said, "Yo, well, you know what? My tall, skinny daughter is so much better than my short, fat daughter." And I just wish my daughter, who was short and fat, well, first of all, I would be appalled if I ever heard someone say that, because
Mm-hmm.
everyone that I know, and I hope everyone that I don't know, if you love your child, you love them, whether they're tall and skinny or short and robust, or if they're black or white or have lots of hair or no hair, or if they're good at sports or good at school, or,
Mm-hmm.
you love your kids. And that's what you're supposed to do as a parent. You love them first. And
Mm-hmm.
you do that to the point where they are totally sick and tired of the love, and you just love them and love them. And then you just let them know that they're different. Don't shy away from it. Yeah, it really stinks that you're the tallest girl in the school and all the boys are shorter than you. That
Mm-hmm.
stinks, but that's going to change. And the same thing with the girl that's short, or the boy that's great at reading books but not good at sports, or the girl with alopecia, or the girl that has the largest hairdo on earth. You love them and you let them know that they're different and they're perfect exactly the way they are. And if they can change something about themselves, then you can change. But if you can't, we need to own it, and you need to know that you're loved.
Yeah, for sure. I love that. And that messaging has continued to be like part of what CAP represents as you continue to go to schools. I mean, we wish that, there wasn't a need for you to travel to go to these schools to talk about alopecia and to help kids, classmates more than anything, understand what's
Right.
happening when they say, "Hey, Baldy," to their classmate with alopecia or
Yeah.
whatever's going on. And I mean, it can get very extreme what's going on in school, and it can also be very small as far as like what we, in a comparison way, not that everything is significant when it's happening. So, what are you finding that's maybe different from when you first started doing school visits to now? What's different?
I think the huge difference that I see is that there's a lot more acceptance. I think
Mm-hmm.
and I think sometimes we get hung up politically, like you're on this side or that side. And, I have a side that I prefer, and that side is somewhere over here, and you might be over there, and you might be saying this and that, and I might be agreeing with you or disagreeing with you. But the one thing that is absolutely true is that no matter what is going on the outsides, what really matters is what's happening overall. And I think what happened overall is that we started to accept people more for who they are. Mm-hmm. And that was in a whole lot of different directions. And a lot of us agreed with it and a lot of us disagreed with it. But regardless if you agree or disagree, when you take a look back, you know, if you're flying at 30,000 feet above and you look down on the issue, it's like, yeah, it doesn't matter what I really think, does it? Because look at this. There's a lot more people that are actually getting along. And if they're getting along, that's not a bad thing, regardless of what you think. So I think because a lot of those differences that were very controversial, mm-hmm. it kind of like bled over into the alopecia community, where the kids were seeing kids with no hair as just another difference, because mm-hmm. their teachers might have been teaching them about the differences in kids and adults that might have to deal with this or that. And those things seem a lot more serious. But then when you're looking at just hair, I think a lot of the kids were realizing that this isn't that big of a deal. So maybe we shouldn't make fun of Bobby or Susie because of them having less hair, because these people over here have really been through a lot, and they've gone through years and years of trying to get to the point where they felt normal. Well, guess what? Regardless of how you feel, no matter what direction you're pointing, that's nothing but a positive, and that's a good thing. And I think from that, once you realize that the kids are actually getting smarter, and whether that's because the teachers are getting smarter or a combination of both, that's a good thing. And it's made my job easier, because I have not had to go in and put out as many fires as I used to. I mean, just as far back as like 8-10 years ago, it was like the majority of the stuff that I was talking about was due to bullying, and also due to administrations and schools and teachers and principals and PTOs. And they're in a lot of situations, those were the bad entities, and they're the ones who are supposed to be overseeing the education of our children.
Right.
So it's getting a lot better. I mean, there's still situations here and there that pop up, but very, very few and far in between, especially within the last 8 years.
Right. I've also seen that kids are extremely accepting. I think the one thing we can do, though, is understand that when kids don't know what's going on, the ideas of what could be going on are just like, oh, well, what about this? What about this? We're just gonna like throw out some phrases until something sticks, or
right.
we'll make you cry, or we'll make you, tell me what's going on because I don't know, right? And so I think that
right.
that's still very common. So the fact that when you go in and you educate, they go, oh, okay.
Yeah.
They just, it's like this childlike understanding of going, yeah, I get it. I don't have to wonder anymore. And I think that's what we all can do, right? I mean, even adults, I mean, the families that I hear from that are like, oh my gosh, these adults, in the park saying rude things and, saying statements that aren't appropriate to a child who is living with alopecia in the park. It's not okay. And so, we start young maybe, and then we have the kids go educate, right? I mean, there's that piece of it too that can happen.
Well, it's funny because the last time that there was an adult that said something that was offensive to a child, and again, a lot of the adults that are saying things, they're kind of not at fault either, because they came up in a system of their parents treating them differently, their teachers treating them differently. Mm-hmm. But it's amazing. I remember years ago, 15 years ago, maybe even longer. I remember there was an older gentleman that made a comment to Maddie, like, "Oh, looks like an Indian got a hold of you." as a reference of being scalped.
Seriously.
Now,
Yeah.
do I believe that that man was being cruel? Absolutely not. I know he wasn't being cruel. He was trying to be funny. He saw a negative and he was trying to put a positive on it by doing a negative. Well, that just happened to another kid. And it was amazing to me that it was like, are you kidding me? There are still people that would say that line, and I still don't blame them. I understand it. It's inappropriate and they shouldn't say it, but there are still people out there that are still living from the education and the people that taught them how to react to different things from the past. And as long as there's still people that are still thinking in that direction, there are still jobs for us to do to make sure that people understand it more. And then I do know that the latter person was really upset that they said that, because the mother explained it to him,
Yeah.
and it has to be devastating, because trust me, I'm a dad. I will say silly things to people, and there's some times where it's like we just went out to dinner, my oldest daughter's birthday, and I was cutting some jokes and I was bringing the waitress into it, and I was trying to make her happy. I wanted her to have a good time with my crazy family. And she decided that she was going to run back to the kitchen, and I'm like, make sure you walk. And when I said it, I got all flushed because I'm thinking, okay, I'm embarrassing myself now. And so I can see how it happens. And I can see how it happens. We just have to gently be able to let people know that you can't say some of the stuff that you think is
Yeah.
okay to say, when in the big scheme of things, it might not be okay.
Yeah. And I think that's the difference today, right? I mean, 15 years ago to today, and that mom did feel like she could say something to him and say,
Yeah.
"Hey, this is what this is. This is," and I'm glad he walked away feeling like crap, because that's how he should have been. That
Right.
is how things should be these days. And it should have been that way long ago, but let's just talk about today. And that's how we do shift, because it's not like we have to go, everybody has to die off so that we can like have everybody be okay with people who have alopecia or
Right.
whatever it might be, right? I mean, it's like, hey, let's educate the older people. Let's say that's not appropriate. Let's do this. And I think that before this, we never did that. We just kind of were, or we felt horrible
Yeah.
about what was going on, and so we didn't say anything.
Yeah. The other thing was, I remember a lot of times where, and it was usually men that were older, but they would call Maddie like, "Hey, little fella," or "How you doing, little guy?" Or
Hmm.
and she would never correct it.
Right.
And by not correcting it, she's pretty much allowing people to say things that she doesn't want to hear. Today, when the kids are put in that position, because I think it's kind of common, because somehow,
Very.
if you're an older person, if you're a kid and you're bald, you obviously have to be a boy, because all boys that are bald are boys, right? It's like boys have crew cuts sometimes, but they're not like bald. So
Right.
that always, and especially when Maddie was wearing like hoop earrings and stuff like that, and wearing mascara. Um, but it's nice because a lot of the kids are saying, "Hey, I'm a girl." Automatically puts the person that said that into apology mode. I mean,
Hmm.
it's so much better than saying nothing and allowing them to get away with it. And when I say that,
Hmm.
I don't mean it maliciously, letting
Yeah.
them get away with it.
Right.
But I mean, if you want to train something, you have to be constant. And if someone's going to call you a little boy and you're a little girl, you have to say, "Excuse me, I am a little girl. I have
Hmm.
alopecia."
Yeah.
And don't say anything else, even though sometimes you would want to say something else. But let that person then absorb that and hopefully make that apology, and then say something kind. And then you educated someone, and then you also helped your own self-esteem because you stood up for yourself.
Sure. I have a couple different responses to that, I guess. Like I'm okay if they want to say something else too. Like I have parents who are like, well, it's kind of rude, but every time somebody stares at my child with alopecia, she sticks her tongue out at them. And I'm like, right on, let her be her, right? I mean, if that's effective for her right now, we want to use words and explanation and feel
Yeah,
empowered, but that right now, that's the empowerment piece for her. She can stick her tongue out and say, hey, you know, and we don't want to always have to have our kids educating people, I
right,
mean, sometimes it's like they just want to move through life and not have to say, hey, I'm a girl. I mean, I don't want to have to say excuse people and say, um, listen, I'm a
yeah,
woman. I mean, there's this whole thing, and you just want to move through life. So I think that we are living in a time where people don't pay attention, and that's a lot of the time what's happening, right? I mean,
yeah,
they, I wear work clothes half the time. I'm remodeling a house, and I'm like, I'm wearing in work clothes and a beanie, and I could look very masculine, right? But if somebody makes a mistake, I do kind of give them I might go, for a second, just a little sound and then look at them and then yeah, have them kind of trip over themselves a little bit and let them do
yeah,
that. But yeah, sometimes you just don't want to. And we don't want our kids to have to be like, always be on it, always tell them, they kind of have to be able to stick their tongue out,
yeah. I
and
mean,
that's the deal.
yeah, I agree.
Yeah. Do you think that okay, so education wise, you are continuing to go into classrooms like you're in a couple hours, you're leaving for is this your first of the year? Your first, well, I mean, you
It's
just went to
technically
England. Yeah.
my second. I
Okay.
mean, I do one offers, if somebody, a lot of times a family, they really don't want me to go to the school, but they really need to talk and so
Right.
I'll set up a Zoom, or if they live within a few hours, I'll travel.
Yeah.
It's hard for me. It's hard for me not to say yes to
Right.
travel because I just remember how I felt.
Yeah.
And I just remember that I think the best thing that ever happened was the first time that somebody actually cared to listen. And
Right.
I just remember how I felt. Now, you could get information from whoever was giving it to you, but
Hmm.
that person who really didn't really want to fix anything, but they just wanted to listen. And then they
Yeah.
just wanted to like gently, point you in a direction. I
Yeah.
think that meant more to me than anything. And
Yeah.
I just have a hard time. I just have a hard time saying no,
Yeah.
which is
Yeah.
why I love my assistant, because my assistant says no sometimes and keeps me, engaged in what I'm supposed to be engaged in.
Yeah.
Time management also is very important.
Yeah. Well, okay. So you're leaving tonight and you're gonna stay local a couple hours away, right? And then you're gonna start
Yeah,
traveling.
yeah.
Yeah.
Pitts. I'm based in Reading, Pennsylvania, so we'll go west to Pittsburgh and then through the Midwest. Um, we'll have a cat kid get together on Saturday. I'll hang out in Kansas City to watch the
Mhm.
Super Bowl,
Mhm.
and I'm from Philly, so it's going to be interesting.
Yeah, that should
Um,
be interesting.
hopefully, I'll be able to leave the city with no harm, and then I'll end up in Houston, Texas, where we'll have another cat get together, and then I'll be coming home.
Yeah.
So I guess I'll be home in like 11 days.
Yeah. Can you tell us a little bit about, you just went to the UK
Yeah,
and that is kind of unique. I mean, you do travel, out of the country, but
yeah,
this was kind of a special situation. I'd
yeah.
love to hear a little bit more about that.
The I think a lot of times when you're thinking about schools, you're thinking about kids, and sometimes it's not the kids that have the problem with a child with alopecia. I'm not going to get into a lot of specifics
Sure.
because
Sure.
it's ongoing, and but to make a long story short, what ended up happening was there was a 7-year-old girl and she got a spot on her part, and it got larger, and there was another spot, and the school decided to question the girl without the parents. And I'm not really sure what the questions were because
Mm-hmm.
they were never made available, but it made the school or the headmaster suspicious that the mother was doing this to the child.
Mm.
And the irony is that the mother worked as an aide at the school and also has alopecia. Um,
Ugh,
so
okay.
the UK works a little bit differently than the United States, but
Mm-hmm.
inevitably, when you bring social services into it, social services, they should have the common sense and the education to make a decision that's not just educated, but also based on instinct that, well, maybe we shouldn't go any further here because the child has a diagnosis from their, I guess, what do they call them, GPs over in England,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
that the diagnosis is alopecia. However,
Right.
we're going to investigate more into this because it doesn't look like it's alopecia. I'm not really sure what they're comparing alopecia to, but
Right.
the social workers were um, all hung up on the fact that the spots were getting bigger and then behind the ears and then on the back of the neck, which is all
Mm-hmm.
classic alopecia areata beginnings.
Mm-hmm.
So, to make a long story short, they decided to accuse the mother of Munchausen by
Oh
proxy
my.
syndrome, and it was kind of silly because it's like I have alopecia, my hair is back, but I have pictures, and if you look at my pictures, you'll see they're pretty much the same as my daughter's. And if you go on to any website, you'll see these photos look pretty universal, which they do.
Yeah.
Um, so the police were brought into it. They actually decided that they were going to take the little girl out of the care of the mother and the grandmother.
Oh my gosh.
And the ex-husband caught wind of it and basically came in to save the day by saying, "You guys are ridiculous if you're thinking that this is happening, but you're not putting my child into foster care. I'll take her."
Mm-hmm.
So the father took the daughter, and then, of course, the mother looked for an attorney. And within a couple of days, they decided that she could go back to the mother, which makes no sense to me because if you're accusing somebody of Munchausen syndrome, which
Right.
for people that
Right.
don't know, it's basically that a parent is actually causing harm to their child for attention for themselves.
Right. Right.
A lot of it is done with poisoning, with hurting, with ways that the child can't articulate.
Right.
And um, they decided to change their mind and they let the child go back with the mother. And if they really thought that the mother was doing harm, why would you let the child go back with the mother? Okay,
Right.
no problem. The parents went and they set up an appointment with a specialist, and the UK's a little bit different. Every time that they go to their GP, it's free. But
Mm-hmm.
just like here in the States, if you're going to get a
Takes
specialist,
time.
which it's going to take a lot of time and it's going to cost
Mm-hmm.
money.
Yeah.
So they were able to get in um, after explaining it to the doctor.
Mm-hmm.
And this is where I really became involved, is that we needed to happen fast because
Mm-hmm.
today, today in the UK is when the decision was made as to what was happening. So they needed to get this done. And last Monday, they were able to get in super fast, which was a blessing.
Yeah.
But it cost £360 to get um, this professional opinion.
Sure.
And it was a very thorough 2-page report. I mean, I don't think I've ever seen a more thorough 2-page report in 20 plus years.
Right.
Well, of course, that wasn't good enough because now they're accusing the family of paying off the doctor
Right.
who was one of the specialists. I mean, this person is a very educated, well-known
Oh my
dermatologist
gosh.
that specializes in alopecia. That's on the board, Cambridge. I mean,
Yeah.
just a
Yeah.
brilliant woman. So now they're fighting with that. And this past Friday, um, this past Friday, the social worker, this is like a documentary that needs to be made.
Mhm.
The head social worker that was in charge of everything and person that basically progressed this to where it's at, her last day working for the agency is on Tuesday, yesterday. But
Mhm.
she let the mother know on a Friday, when the mother has no recourse on a Saturday or Sunday, that we believe that you're doing this to your child and we're going to continue to pursue it, which basically makes you feel horrible for the whole weekend where you
Mhm.
can't do anything about it. So unfortunately, I needed to leave. Um, Today, they actually had the hearing and it still continues.
Okay.
But I believe it's going to end because there is a practice that has three doctors, and they're giving all the information to these three doctors. And if all three of them come to the determination that it's alopecia,
Mhm.
then it will be over. Social services will not apologize, of course, and I'm okay with that.
What do you think? I mean, this is like a nightmare, a
It's a
friggin'
nightmare.
nightmare. I mean, like I'm listening to this and I'm like, are you kidding me? First off, it's happening, right? I mean, you
Yeah.
are a parent with alopecia and this is happening to your child. So that in itself is something you're figuring out, right? I mean, as usual, parents, they go to themselves first. What have I done? Like they know that like that's just a default for parents. What have I done? You know, what can I do? Was it my genes? Was it this? Was it that? Right? That's immediately where we go. And then we go, okay, you know, is there extra stress? And then how can we do that? But now there's this whole other component full of BS. And I'm like, what you know, we're not scaring people by telling this story. I mean, we're just saying this is a situation that is happening right now. Is there something as listeners that we can do? I know you were asking for photos of all different types of
Yeah.
alopecia, right? To show and turn in to say this is the wide variety of ways this shows up. Is that
Yeah. I mean,
something that
I got unsolicited pictures. I didn't say what kind of photos that I wanted. I just wanted photos. And of
Mhm.
course, the majority of the photos that I got sent were the ones with, complete
Universal,
universalis.
right?
But I got a lot with just basic areata, and it is
Hmm.
uncanny how you could not pick the child in the UK, her head, from all the other ones. Because when you put
Hmm.
them all together, they all blended in. So I made a video for the social workers for today, which had me basically explaining just in very simplistic terms alopecia, but I wanted to show them alopecia and the different
Right.
levels. And the thing is, I included three photos of the girl in question in the UK, the 7-year-old, and I compared it along with all these other new photos that I got. And it is amazing how similar they all look. And the
Sure.
thing is, I I I, I wish I could have been in that meeting because I would have said,
Huh.
"Oh, and by the way, because you're so concerned with this child and you know what you're talking about, I want you to pick out those three photos that were actually of this girl." Because you obviously are experts at this and you know that something
Mhm.
wrong is happening. I just want you to show me,
If you can.
yeah, show me which one. And what I really should have done is I should have found somebody that actually shaved spots into their head and say, it's kind of obvious when somebody is shaving a spot into your head and when it
Hmm.
is just beautifully smooth and sometimes perfectly round and sometimes not so much. And when they connect and how they look, I just, for the life of me, I know that social workers have hard jobs. And I think by and large, they
Yeah,
have
for
a tough
sure.
situation because their job is to protect children. I
Hmm.
get it. But the mother is an aide at the school. The headmaster should have first just said something to the mother. And
Hmm.
then a mother could have said, well, yeah, I'll show you pictures of my alopecia and we'll compare them to my daughter. It's alopecia. We'll go to this website, look at these photos. I just don't understand why it went further to the
Right.
headmaster calling the police and then the police calling social services, and then social services actually climbing on this mountain and willing to die on it
Right.
because of something that they don't really know much about. And
Right.
then when they get an expert that does a 2-page dissertation
Mhm.
as to what it is, that they're deciding that it's still not enough. We want more dermatologists to make decisions on this. I just think it's the most ridiculous thing I've ever, and I've said that often,
Mhm.
but right now this is the most ridiculous thing I've seen. Yes.
Um,
All right. So,
all right.
um,
So this is a to be continued story, and we're hoping that there is a really positive outcome.
yeah,
And I guess for the mom who will hopefully be listening to this, we just want to put our support out there for her and know that being a parent with alopecia is really hard. Being a parent is hard, and then having something like this. I mean, I it may sound insensitive right now, but hopefully she will be the only person to go through this. This
yeah,
can be something that hopefully doesn't need to be referenced. Hopefully these three doctors that are coming on board will just say this, but at the same time, if it is, we just yeah, the most positive outcome is for this child to be able to live comfortably and with her
yeah.
mother and understand that she's loved, understand that she is not alone, and that this is happening, and there's a support system out there for her for
Yeah, and
sure.
I think the moral of the story is that it's just not the kids that are out there in the world that need to be educated.
Yeah.
Even the smart people. I mean, we all know how smart people run things, and sometimes those smart people, maybe they shouldn't be running the things that they're running. So maybe just a little education sometimes,
Hmm.
just for like updates.
Yeah.
So we all need an update in what our thought process is, and sometimes I think adults need to learn a little bit about things that they might not be very familiar with.
Hmm.
Um, so, but I
What?
see I see good things happening
Yeah.
from this.
Yeah.
I can only see positives happening from this,
Yeah.
because I think inevitably what will end up happening is the right thing will be done, and then positive stuff will start to grow from it. So I'm staying
Hmm.
optimistic.
Hmm. And again, I mean, it comes back to education is key, right? I mean, it wouldn't have
Yeah.
happened if that headmaster and school staff understood alopecia a little bit more, and there is so much education. There really is not an excuse for them not knowing, and being able to research online even in the smallest degree. So yeah, I guess moving on from that, even though you and I could probably talk about this for a little bit longer. um do you feel like things have shifted since the introduction of clinical trials and also the availability of um, treatment options, I guess,
Um,
for alopecia?
yeah. Now, okay, water's cold and I'm taking my time.
Mhm.
I think it's a double-edged sword. It's a positive in one way. It's a positive because there is something finally out there after all of these years that is showing a small amount of success. And I think looking at the success is a positive. I think that when you look at the people that are posting, especially on social media, about the successes, what that's doing, it's only showing a handful of successes, because it's not everyone, it's just the ones that are successful. That other people now are looking at those successes thinking that, well, if I can go ahead and get involved with this, we'll find success too. And then of course, then you have that that whole false hope scenario where it's like it might not be working the same for you. So therefore, are you going to criticize it, or are you going to keep on trying? And then when you look at the negative side effects that are projected into the future, the possibility, I don't care how strong or little of a possibility, those are some very heavy possible side effects that could be life-threatening. So when you take all of that and you put it together, it, it it's really hard for someone like me to have an opinion other than self-esteem, confidence. If the treatment is worse than the alopecia, stop, because I really do believe in those three concepts. If the treatment is worse than the alopecia, you stop. What we do know is alopecia is not painful. Alopecia is not life-threatening. All the medication that has ever been developed for something else that has been used for alopecia, most of it will not work because there's no proof that it does work. There's no proof that it doesn't work, but you could get a rash, you could get itchy scalp. So basically that means that's worse than the alopecia. So if there's any negative side effects in the future, that's worse than the alopecia. But then you have people that are looking at it as, well, I see this success, so now I want. So I think there's a dynamic here that's difficult to navigate, because if I tell people not to try, parent, give up. You can't put a Band-Aid on that. You're not going to fix it. And if you fix it, you might end up hurting the child down the road. It makes me look like, well, obviously I don't want a cure. There's nobody that wants to be out of business more than me. Mm-hmm. But my only prerequisite is a very simple one. Anything that's developed needs to help 100% of the people 100% of the time. And there can't be life-threatening side effects in the future. Mm-hmm. We can all deal with diarrhea or other type of side effects that are manageable, still worse than the alopecia. And I think a lot of people would suffer through some of that, the negative side effects. But the worst side effects, I wouldn't be able to live with myself ever telling somebody that, yeah, you should go ahead and try it. And I think a lot of the parents that are trying these medications, I'm not really sure if they're looking into the future about the possibility of those side effects happening. And I think that if you look down the road 20 or 30 years, and if any of these kids that are now adults get diagnosed with any of this stuff, will the parents feel responsible for that happening? And maybe it might not have anything to do with the medication that's being done now, but I have a feeling that whether it contributed or not, the parents would hold themselves accountable for that and would feel extremely horrible. Mm-hmm. So again, we need research, and we need new ways of treating alopecia, and hopefully we need to cure it. But I'm willing to hold out for a cure versus something that is pretty nasty. But I do understand why people would want to use it. As an adult, as an educated adult, I would have no problem with somebody making that decision because they understand it. But to have a parent make the decision for a child, I think that's just really hard. And
it is.
I'm just very thankful I'm not in that position.
Yeah, I mean, because
I guess that's a very long, convoluted way of telling you what I think. I just,
I mean,
I
know what you think.
Myself. Yeah.
No, I know what you think. And I mean, I think for the parents who are now presented with this option, it's like you being presented with the spa in Russia, right? I mean, it's like the same, it's the same, clearly different, but it's not. It's all kind of that opportunity for an option, and then they're assessing whether or not they can do it. And my philosophy has always been, as someone when I'm helping families, as adults. I mean, I have a girlfriend who just started a JAK inhibitor, and she was totally fine with being bald if that was going to be her life. And she opted to do the JAK inhibitor because that's where she is in her life. And she said, yeah, but for my kids, I could never choose that. Right. I mean, she understood that. And so as far as my philosophy goes, not that it matters, but it it's like you take so many things into consideration. Your child's age, their maturity level, their, the things that are happening in their lives, and then you make those decisions. And this can be about everything, whether or not I
Right.
have this example of like, oh, are you going to put onion juice on your child's head every night because you heard it worked? And it's pretty, it's like, it's not so bad, right? I mean, it's not something that's going to hurt them in the long run. But then you go, yeah, but does my child really want to sit there every night and smell like onions? And do I want to like think I'm having spaghetti every night? And it's just kind of like this, what asking your child when they don't understand is
Yeah.
kind of an interesting concept too, right? You go, hey, do you want to try this pill? Do you want to have this shot? It they say it'll help your hair grow back, right? So, but on a mature level, they don't understand that. And how long will I have to take it? Will it just be one shot, or will it be a shot every 30 days, or will it be a shot for 6 months? So this, taking into consideration, it's not just this. It's like you'll have to take this forever. And then what happens if you have to take antibiotics? I mean, there's so many different factors now with JAK inhibitors that if you start introducing other things, and did they do studies on pregnant women who were taking it? No, right? And so I just, yeah, there's so much that we could talk about this, but yeah, when we're talking about kids, I think that as parents, we have to make decisions every day for our kids. And then there's a certain point when they're old enough, and when actually all ages, I always ask them to say, do you want something like this? When they're in the doctor's office and they've been confronted with a steroid injection, right? And the mom's like, oh, well, I guess this is the only time we can get in. We waited 45 days for this appointment. We
Yeah.
better do it. And then the kid's like, no, don't do it. Right. And so like that tells you maybe not the right time to do this, right?
Right.
And just leave and think about it and talk about it later and do some more
Yeah.
research.
Um, it's probably the one thing that I'm most torn about, and dare I say, upset about. Because the reason I'm upset is I think a lot of times the parents are making excuses for the approval of doing it because the doctor is saying that, well, those side effects are, they don't even know what the percentage of that side effect is going to be, because it's going to be in the future, and it's all based on the pharmaceutical information. And I think that's really, as long as you're making the decision based on the pharmaceutical finding, and they're very clear. I mean, I have with all the JAK inhibitors, I have the printout of all of the, and I keep the printouts with me because I want to make sure that I'm never um, misquoting any of it.
Right,
And
right.
it's still not close to zero. And if it was closer to zero, I would have an easier time with it.
Mm-hmm.
But I think, like, I always talk about alopecia being the easiest physical disease, along with vitiligo, being the easiest physical disease on earth to have. The medicine that has ever been used pretty much doesn't work until today. There's, you know, I can't remember the exact percentage, but the percentage is like 23% out of the 100% of the people using it will show some type of improvement. But I can't remember exactly, but it's a lot better than anything else. So
Mm-hmm.
it does show promise. But the thing is, 75% of women that get diagnosed with cancer, their number one fear is hair loss. So here we are giving a child something that might show up years from now as something like cancer, where the biggest fear is losing their hair. So
Mm-hmm.
it just doesn't make any sense to me. I think if I could have, and I would never recommend this to anyone because that's not what we do. Because we're just always going to push confidence, self-esteem, and we're always going to say the same thing when it comes to treatments, that if you know if the treatment is worse than the alopecia, I we wouldn't recommend you doing it. I would just think that the odds would have to be better. I'm not a gambler, and I think sometimes that's a good thing. And if I am going to gamble, it needs to be a sure thing if I'm gambling on my children. And that pretty much means I need to be guaranteed 100% that I'm going to win. And
Mhm.
if it was 99%, if it's 99%, there's 1% that are losing. I don't want to be in that 1%. And to be honest with you, I don't want any family to be in that 1%. So sometimes it's just easier to wait for that treatment that comes along that is not worse, that is better than the alopecia. And I don't
Right.
know if that's happening. And if it does happen, I don't know when. I just try and stay realistic. Autoimmune diseases are autoimmune diseases. And there's a lot of autoimmune diseases that are nasty and horrible. And they're not close to finding a cure for that. Alopecia is easy, and they're a lot further away. So I'm just going to hope for the best.
Yes. Out, Outside of this, I mean, I think we have kids who've been part of CAP for a long time, and some of them have had JAK inhibitors recently.
Mm-hmm.
And the one thing that I will say about community, the one thing, probably not the one thing, only thing, is that people need community, whether or not they are having a treatment or not. Community is key. We need to know that people are in our camp, people are in understand us, people get it. And so do you feel like these kids that have not have hair growth still feel like they belong in CAP?
Uh, that's a good question. I think I think by and large, not so much as they used to, but I know that we do have kids that have a full head of hair that are still involved.
Hmm.
And I think the reason why they're still involved is mainly because of the connections that they made
Yeah.
and the friendships they made, and they still want to have those friendships.
Hmm.
Um, Obviously, if a kid has all their hair back, they still are a CAP kid or a CAP teen, and they're always
Totally.
invited back. Same thing with their families,
Yeah.
because as we know, this is very unpredictable, and we have no
Hmm.
idea if it's going to stay in forever or fall out forever, or just keep on growing and falling.
Yeah.
So I think sometimes when you have a negative in your life, and then you find something that's positive, and then all of a sudden your hair grows back, and you don't have to be reminded about that negative anymore. And that camp or that group, that just reminds me of how I felt about myself. So I totally get them not wanting to come back.
Hmm.
Um, but we do have kids that are coming back. Actually, the CAP Kid Get Together that we have in Kansas City, we actually have a 17-year-old that's going to be attending, and they've had their hair back for like maybe 3 years. But they've not last year's Alopecia Palooza, but they were at the last four. And that does a lot, because what that girl's going to do, she's going to be somebody to look up to when it
Hmm.
comes to the other kids that are going to be there.
Yeah.
So she doesn't need to have hair, or she can have a full head of hair, because she has a story, and that story is going to resonate with the other parents and with the kids.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, I mean, there's lots of kids that will just fall away, and we'll miss them. But then again, I always say, well, not always, but I've said in the past that, I hope I never see you again. I hope you grow your hair and I never see you again. I hope you keep your
Or
hair. Yeah,
or we hope that they not that we hope they have no hair forever, but that they feel good enough that they are just, their confidence is boosted. They don't need, it's not
right.
the hair. I mean, I think that that's kind of misconception too. Oh, is it the hair that's going to make them confident they'll never have any
No,
problems in the world again? No, I think we know that that's just not true. Because
they might not know that,
right.
but we know, because you grow your hair back. Now all of a sudden people are teasing you about this, and then you change that. Listen, that's the one thing we know. If you're a jerk, you're going to find a reason. And what we need to do is help those jerks not be jerks anymore. So everyone that's different don't have to worry about the jerks. But the people that are different, they also are the jerks. And we just need less jerks.
Yeah.
I don't know how else to say it. It's the simplest way of saying it. You just need people that are empathetic and just don't worry about anyone else. Worry about yourself and be a good person. And that's it.
Yeah. I think the thing that we also we don't talk about the fact that hair doesn't like boost to solve all our problems. We talked about that briefly just now, but then there's something else. Like hair does spontaneously grow back, and we're still the same people. It's like we're the same people wherever we go, wherever we're at. That's who we are, right? And so if we can build that confidence, and I think that I know throughout the years, CAP does continue to attract the kids where they feel like they had community, where they have connection, and that's the most important thing. And you always want to give it to them. I know for me, I needed that when I was young, and I didn't have it, right? I mean, I'm old, so it didn't exist, and so I think.
I always said if we would just go ahead and rent a warehouse and just stick the kids in the warehouse and lock the doors and then keep them in there for 2 hours, when we would open the doors in 2 hours, we would see a change in our kids.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not because we're smart. It's not because we're great parents. It's not because CAP is a great organization. It's because we gave these kids an opportunity to hang out with each other.
Mm-hmm.
And they get to figure out stuff amongst themselves, because you have this little kid that's looking at this kid going, oh my gosh, they're really doing bad, but this one is doing great. Now, where am I in this? And then, do I want to be like him or do I want to be like her? And then you start feeling better about your situation, or maybe you'll start feeling worse about your situation, which gives you the encouragement to try harder and to try to do something different, to feel better. And if you're doing great, you get to go and say, you know what, I feel pretty good about myself because I'm actually helping people that are doing less. It's so simple, and it's not taken advantage of enough, which is why we're not doing all the CAP kid camps this year. We decided that, we want to get back to basics. We want to have group get-togethers. We need to foster these relationships so that way they become a community within themselves. And then when we have Alopecia Palooza, if they want to get together with a vast group from different areas, then they can attend Alopecia Palooza, and they can do it as a group like we used to in the old days.
Right.
By doing that, they get to go to a camp that they might be afraid of going to by themselves as a family. But if they know that other families are going, you go as a united front. And then from that, we're going to start doing the CAP Kid camps again in 2026, because we're going to foster more of these groups getting together and feeling good about themselves regionally. And if that doesn't work, then we're just going to come up with a different idea, because as long as there's going to be kids with alopecia, there's going to be CAP. And as long as there's CAP, we're going to try and think of different ways of reaching out and helping.
Yeah. And I was wondering, because you and I hadn't talked about this new change for the year. I mean, I knew that the CAP kid groups were happening, the get-togethers were happening instead of the camps. And then there was big Alopecia Palooza. So I mean, it's like, it's time to pivot and change and see what works, like you said. And then maybe in 2026, do go back to the camps. I mean, I love that you're willing to kind of do things. And I'm sure you've heard probably a lot of like, well, why aren't you doing a camp here anymore? Or I'm sure.
Trust me, I'm the one that has the biggest complaint about not doing the camps, because I get to go to all of them and I feel good about all of them. They're the best. I mean, I love my family, I love my friends, but I would rather be doing a camp than going to a party or going out, Yeah, I get so much out of it still. And as long as I'm getting something out of it, it's something that's not a chore. And because I get to see families, and I get to see the kids benefit from this. I mean, there's nothing more magical than that. And it's not because I'm doing anything, it's because I'm witnessing it. And The families are doing it, the kids are doing it, and they don't even realize that they're doing it, but it's really them. And then when I bring people like you and other mentors into it, where they get to see people that are accomplished, and they get to think to themselves, well, they're doing this and they're a professional doing that. It pretty much shows that I can do anything that I want. And you know what? You're right. You can do anything. So it's tough not having the camps. But I think the the best part about when we started this, there were no camps, there were no alopecia paloozas, there were just the Pennsylvania support group.
Mm-hmm.
People from other states found us. Then we started putting support groups in other states. And they're as active as the people that are in those groups are. And
Right.
sometimes you have a lot of activity, sometimes you don't. Because as you
Mm-hmm.
know, most kids that lose their hair, they're going to grow their hair back. And the chances of it never falling out are pretty good. So a lot of these kids don't need us anymore, but there are obviously kids that do need us. We just need to reinforce those groups so that way everybody knows that they are leaders of that group and they don't need me for that group. And
Right.
that's why we're doing these get-togethers, so we can bring people together, and the people that come, I can basically say, listen, you have no responsibility. It's not on you. You're
Mm-hmm.
part of this group, and your job is for you to make yourself and your child feel good. So
Mm-hmm.
organize these events, get the word out there on the Cap Kid group page that the group is about. And if you need anything from me, let me know and we'll help you.
Mm-hmm.
Um, if we can do that with the 58 groups that we have, and if everybody does something just once, I mean, I personally would like it. I mean, when we started out, we did it once a month, whether we had one
Mm-hmm.
family or we had 4 families or 10 families. It
Right.
was something that if you needed us, we were there. Um,
Yeah.
but I just want the groups to know that they're the ones in charge. They have the power, and you guys get that power, initiate it at your group level, and then next year, come to the Cap Kid camps, come to Alopecia Palooza, and
Mm-hmm.
continue having group meetings. And then when you don't need us anymore, we'll miss you.
Yeah.
You don't have to leave, but
Yeah.
we'll miss you if you don't want to do it anymore.
Yeah.
Um, but we're always there.
Yeah.
So
And I think that I talk to a lot of people online and over the phone, and I let them know that there is a group within, a lot of the times it's within an hour or something like that. And I try to let them know the transformation that happens to their
yeah,
child when they're around other kids with a support group. It's immediate. I mean, I see it at camps, especially within 20 minutes of being there. You
yeah,
see, I mean, it's like you say, it's like you just want to be around this energy where kids feel welcome and understood.
yeah,
And so I can't stress enough as your podcast host, as as someone who's lived with alopecia and someone who's seen the transformation happen with kids, it's worth the drive. It's worth, going through a snowstorm to get to. It's worth leaving work early. It's worth pulling them out of school. It's worth all of those things to see your child
yeah,
feel it. It's so awesome. It's incredible. So,
yeah. The
um,
only the only, in my opinion, and obviously I'm biased, the only legitimate reason I can understand a family not coming, and I'm only referencing Alopecia Palooza. The only reason why you should not come to Alopecia Palooza is if your child is in high school and has finals. I understand that.
yeah,
Any other situation, I promise you that 4 days of Alopecia Palooza will be more educational than anything else that child's going to learn either
mhm,
in June or in August, because they're the end and the beginning of the school year.
yeah,
Um, and this year's it's August 8th to the 11th
yeah,
in Indiana. So some schools are going back earlier than that, and I don't understand.
yeah,
It's a whole different ballgame. But yeah, it's definitely worth it. And I'm not saying that because I know we're going to sell out this year. because we already have 25 people, 25 people, like 7 families registered. It's the earliest we've ever had that many.
Yeah.
And we can only have 220 at Camp
Hmm.
Carson, which is a great camp in Indiana. So that's going to sell out, and I would feel very bad for people that really need to go,
Hmm.
not registering. So,
Yeah. Cool.
especially since there's no other camps.
Right. Right. And yeah, I love that. I mean, let's just, yeah, I want to see what happens. And I do, want to again say though that these small gatherings, like you said, are pivotal for that. They just go, oh, you meet in your local town, you drive an hour, you do whatever, and those small groups can also do on a smaller level, but on a same significance, right? Just feel that understanding of the group. And parents get that too, by the way. It's not just the kids. The
Yeah,
parents connecting is huge.
and what I can do is I can give you the the link, so that way if people want to have a get together,
Mm-hmm.
they can fill out the information, let me know where they're at. I might not be able to come to every location,
Mm-hmm.
but every location can have a get together.
Right.
Now, I made a commitment that I'm going to go to each state. We're going to have a get together. That doesn't mean that you have to wait until I come to your state. It just
Right.
means that in this month, I'll be in Idaho. But if you're in Idaho and you really need something now, go ahead. And
Yeah.
if you need something from me, that's what we're here for. We're here to help support.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So you are a nonprofit, and that means donations are always welcome and necessary to kind of continue to make this grow. How do people make a donation to CAP?
You can go to the Children's Alopecia Project.org and make a donation there. Or our Cap Kid appeal is still going on. So that would
Mm-hmm.
be capkidappeal.org.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And I'll have all of those links in the show notes for everybody to reference. I just want to thank you for being here as always. I love hearing what's new, what's going on, and I do continue to love hearing that, significant changes and transformations are happening for kids and families because that's the most important thing. So thank you for all you
Yeah,
do.
we could probably do a fundraiser where we just stay on this podcast and
Yeah.
just go for days, because I don't think we would stop talking.
We do have questions coming in. We're like, oh, let's talk
I
about
know.
that.
You hear little typewriters in the background, and
Yeah, little phones ringing, little red
no,
things lighting up.
there's no one I enjoy speaking to more than
Oh,
you.
thank you.
You have you have a tremendous expertise in what you do, with everything dealing with alopecia, and your friendship has been very invaluable to what we do, and I appreciate it.
You're welcome.
I have nothing but gratitude for you.
Oh, thank you so much. Cool. Well, thanks again for being here, Jeff, and safe travels. And we will look forward to an update about the UK
Yes.
situation. I think we'll all be wanting to know how this turns out, and maybe by the time this releases, we'll have information, and hope it's all positive for this family. So,
I'm hoping for the best.
yeah, thank you.
All right. Take care.
You too. Okay. Bye.